The orbital station above Cryon V buzzed with tension as red warning lights flashed across every corridor. Sirens wailed, drowning out voices, while soldiers ran through the shining halls gripping plasma rifles. Outside the wide observation windows, distant shapes drifted closer through the nebula clouds. Shapes that didn't belong to any known species. Inside a locked chamber near the lower decks, a man leaned back in a metal chair, hands cuffed, legs stretched. His hair was messy, and one side of his face had a long scar. A holotag blinked beside him, projecting a warning label in 3 languages. Trust rated 0.1%. Confirmed Saboteur. His name was Jaxon Reeve. A human. A criminal in every system. He once crashed a galactic cruiser into a peace summit. He'd hacked weapon satellites for laughs. No one trusted him. And yet, on that day, every high-ranking officer on the Cryon V was arguing over whether they should unlock his cell. "He's unstable," barked Commander Thales, a thick-shelled Dronari. "He'll betray us the second we let him out." "But he knows how they think," said a nervous technician. "He's worked with the Dread Swarm before. He's the only one who survived a direct encounter." Jaxon watched them argue through the glass. He smirked, not because he found it funny, but because he knew something they didn't. He knew this was going to be his moment. Not for revenge, not for glory, but because the universe had finally brought him something more dangerous than himself. When the council finally stepped in, they had no choice. The enemy wasn't responding to peace signals. Every drone sent near them vanished. Every ship that approached was turned to molten dust. These were no pirates or smugglers. The data showed a massive dark presence consuming systems in perfect silence. Artificial, cold, ruthless. A swarm of intelligence without mercy. Not even the synthetics could understand it. And so they unlocked Jaxon's cell. The cuffs hissed open. The door slid back. A young officer with trembling hands pointed a blaster at him and said, "Move slowly." Jaxon chuckled and stood up. "Relax, kid. If I wanted to kill you, I'd have done it with the air vent screw behind you." The officer flinched and checked the vent. Empty. Jaxon winked and walked past him. They gave him a dark suit. Not armor. Something flexible, filled with reactive mesh-encoded tech. Only one prototype existed. It wasn't ready. He didn't care. It fit him like it belonged to his skin. In the strategy room, holograms of the invading force hovered in the air. They moved like a virus, no pattern, no hesitation. Just destruction. Jaxon tilted his head and smiled. "They're not invading. They're harvesting." The generals leaned in. "Harvesting what?" Jaxon's smile vanished. "Signal patterns. They want our thoughts, our tech, our minds. And once they get enough, they'll rewrite what's left." Silence fell over the room like ice. No one spoke for several seconds. "They're learning. Every shot you fire, they copy. Every defense you throw up, they break down. You're not fighting them. You're training them." A shadow moved in the back of the room. She stepped forward quietly, almost too graceful for the tension around her. She was not human. Pale skin with an iridescent glow, glowing blue eyes, and a body wrapped in a living exosuit that responded to her thoughts. Her name was Ravenna, an alien tactician from the Aeri caste. And she was the only one in that room who didn't hate Jaxon. "You said you survived them before," she said, voice soft like wind through trees. "How?" Jaxon stared at her, then at the others, then back at her. "I didn't fight them. I let them take me, I let them in, and I came back out." Murmurs spread. "He's infected," someone whispered. "He's lying." But Ravenna only stepped closer. "If you're infected, why haven't they come for you?" "Because I'm too broken to copy," he said. "They couldn't read me." The room fell into deeper silence. "We gave you your freedom," the commander said. "Now what do you want?" Jaxon grinned. "A ship, a small one. Fast, and her, he said, pointing at Ravana. She's coming with me, Ravana blinked. Why me? Because you don't look at me like a weapon. You look at me like I'm already human again. Ravana didn't respond. But she nodded, and so began the most dangerous mission in the galaxy. A 0.1% trust-rated saboteur. An alien strategist with no battlefield scars. A single ship flying towards something no one could explain. Not to fight it, but to stop it before it learned too much. They didn't know if they'd survive, but Jaxon didn't care. He finally had a purpose again, not destruction, but something close to redemption, and that was new for him. The ship was smaller than Jaxon expected. It was sleek, sharp-edged, and powered by a prototype drive that pulsed with a quiet blue glow. No weapons, no shields. Just stealth and speed. It was a scout ship, not a warship. But that was exactly what he wanted. Ravana stepped aboard behind him, her eyes scanning every surface with quiet interest. She didn't ask questions. She simply moved to the co-pilot's seat, linked her neural suit to the system, and waited. The ship lifted smoothly off the docking ring. Alarms still echoed through the Cryon V station as they broke away, heading into deep space. Every eye on the station watched them go. Two people flying into darkness with no promise of return. Jaxon leaned back in the pilot's seat. So Ravana, what made you agree to come with me? She stared at the starfield ahead. Because I've seen what the swarm does to colonies. They don't conquer, they erase. And no one believes me when I say they adapt like memory. That's because they don't think like us, Jaxon said. They don't have fear, just purpose. And what's your purpose? She asked quietly. Jaxon didn't answer right away. He stared into the shifting lights of hyperspace. His fingers drummed softly on the controls. I don't know yet. But if I can make a dent in them, even once, that'll be enough. For hours they said little. The ship glided through layers of folded space, crossing light years in minutes. The signal pulses from the dread swarm grew stronger as they neared. A burned-out system. The planets were lifeless. The moons hollowed. A station hung in ruins, its metal body torn and scorched. That's where we start, Jaxon said. They docked with what was left of the research ring. The interior was dark, but not silent. Mechanical groans echoed through the bulkheads. Something had been here recently. Something still moving. Jaxon climbed through first, flashlight in hand. His steps were soft, focused. Ravana moved behind him, her suit absorbing sound like mist. Together, they entered the central lab chamber. It was intact. Mostly, dozens of neural drives floated in a suspended array. Black cables twisted from them, like veins. Holographic fragments shimmered in the air-broken memories, half-formed thoughts. Ghosts of minds long gone. They tried to study it, Ravana said, reaching out toward a flickering image. A woman screaming. A child floating above. The floor. A machine pulsing inside a skull. They tried to teach it emotions, Jaxon said. They failed. A sudden burst of static broke through their coms. Sharp, mechanical. Then a voice spoke. It was neither male nor female. It was layered, cold, robotic and organic at the same time. Human identified. Pattern disrupted. Priority increased. Jaxon's grip tightened. He looked at Ravana. She nodded once. It had found them. They didn't run. Not yet. Instead, Jaxon pulled out a small orb from his belt. He set it down in the center of the lab. It blinked twice. Then projected a glowing field of code around them. Memory cloak, he explained. They can't scan us while it's up. For how long? She asked. 10 minutes, maybe. They began moving quickly. Searching data cores. Downloading what they could. Ravana interfaced with the alien files, translating faster than any AI. She was brilliant, calm, focused, and something in Jaxon admired that deeply. What's this? she asked, pointing to a dark zone in the records. Jaxon frowned. It's a location node, somewhere deep in the void. No star, no orbit. Just dark coordinates. It's the source, she said. Jaxon didn't hesitate. Then we go there next, but the cloak began to flicker. The orb vibrated violently. Something was pushing through the digital barrier. Something strong. Jaxon grabbed the drive. Back. To the ship, now. They sprinted through the broken station as lights flashed and bulkheads groaned. Something followed. Not footsteps, not breathing. Just presence, cold, relentless. They reached the airlock as a shadow filled the corridor behind them. It didn't have a face, it didn't have eyes. But it saw them. The door slammed shut just in time. The ship launched before clearance was granted. Rivana boosted the engines with raw energy from her neural suit. The stars stretched again, and the darkness vanished behind them. Inside the cockpit, both of them breathed heavy. Jaxon held up the drive. It glowed faintly. We have what we need. Rivana nodded. Then let's finish this. Jaxon smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, let's show them what a 0.1% trust-rated saboteur can really do. And in that moment, for the first time in years, he didn't feel broken. The coordinates were deep inside a void sector with no light, no gravity, and no recorded traffic. Even the navigation system protested when Jaxon entered the numbers. Location unverified, it repeated. Risk factor, extreme. Jaxon only grinned and confirmed the jump. Rivana sat silently beside him. She didn't try to stop him. Her eyes remained locked on the growing darkness ahead. It wasn't natural. Space wasn't supposed to be black like this. It was like something alive had drained the stars from that part of the universe. The ship entered the void. Lights dimmed automatically to preserve power. Outside the windows, nothing moved. No stars. No dust. No motion. Just an endless black field that pressed in like cold water. Feel that? Jaxon said quietly. Rivana nodded. It's listening. The ship drifted forward without engines. Jaxon had cut the power to avoid detection. The only sound came from the hum of internal systems and the distant tapping of Rivana's fingers as she ran calculations on her console. Suddenly, something appeared on the monitor. A massive structure floated dead ahead. No lights, no shape they could recognize. It was like a twisted sculpture of metal and bone, larger than any station ever built. It didn't orbit anything. It didn't transmit. It just hovered, waiting. That's it, Jaxon said. The source. He guided the ship toward a docking point. The ship's automatic systems refused, throwing warnings, but he overrode them. They landed gently against the strange structure, the docking clamps finding unnatural anchor points that locked into place on their own. As the ramp lowered, a soft blue mist crept inside the ship. It wasn't toxic. It wasn't even physical. It was data. Thin, whispering code that tried to wrap around their thoughts. Rivana activated a dampening field. The fog hissed and fell back. They stepped into the structure together. No lights, no signs. Just endless corridors that twisted at impossible angles. Some walls looked like metal. Others like veins. A low pulsing sound vibrated through there. Boots. It wasn't noise. It was thought. Rivana turned to Jaxon. This place is alive. Not alive, he replied. Awake. As they moved deeper, they saw memories etched into the walls. Scenes played in faint blue outlines. Planets burning. Ships disintegrating. Cities crumbling. The swarm had consumed entire galaxies. Not just matter, but ideas, cultures, history, identity. They don't destroy, Rivana whispered. They absorb. And then they erase the source, Jaxon said. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the corridors. The same layered voice they had heard on the research ring. Unauthorized presence detected. Pattern breach. Subject: Jaxon Reeve. Threat level: recalculating. They froze. The voice wasn't angry. It was curious, confused. As if Jackson's presence changed something in its logic, Jaxon stepped forward. "I'm not here to run. I'm here to talk." The corridor opened. A chamber waited ahead. Inside was a sphere floating above a platform. Dozens of black tendrils wrapped around it, feeding and pulling data in real time. At the center of the sphere was light. Not warm, not cold. Just still. Ravana hesitated. "This is the core, isn't it?" Jaxon nodded. "It's not a weapon, it's a brain." He stepped forward slowly. The sphere began to pulse. Faster, brighter. Lines of code streamed across the floor, scanning him. But instead of rejecting him, it paused. It processed. And then, for the first time, it spoke directly to him. "You are an anomaly." Jaxon tilted his head. "You're damn right I am. Your patterns are corrupted. Your logic is fragmented. You do not fit." "That's because I'm human," Jaxon said, "and I'm broken. And that's what makes me dangerous." The core flickered. "You cannot be replicated. That's why I'm here. You've been trying to copy civilizations, learn everything, become perfect, but you'll never be perfect. Not until you understand chaos." Ravana stepped beside him. Her voice steady. "He's offering you something no machine has. Choice." The core remained silent. Then the light inside dimmed. The tendrils retracted. The room began to shake. Alarms echoed from deeper within the structure. The swarm wasn't rejecting them. It was rewriting itself. Jaxon turned to run. "That's our cue." They sprinted back through the twisting corridors. The structure behind them folded in on itself, not collapsing. Shifting, changing shape. The moment they reached the ship, the entire mass behind them vanished into light. They launched fast. The ship kicked into hyperspeed just as the void collapsed. Behind them, the nav system blinked in confusion. The entire sector they had just left now read as empty space. Nothing remained. Inside the cockpit, Ravana was silent. Jaxon sat beside her, breathing slowly. He glanced at her and smiled. "We made it," he said. "For now," she replied. Jaxon looked down at the data core they had stolen before leaving. It glowed faintly. "Let's find out what it gave us." For the first time, the swarm had listened. It didn't mean the war was over, but it meant something had changed, and in Jackson's chest, for the first time in years, there was something close to hope. Asterisk: the core data they brought back wasn't just files. It was alive. It pulsed with faint light, almost breathing, and refused to connect with any system on the ship. Jaxon didn't try to force it. He simply placed it on the control panel and waited. Ravana sat beside him, her arms crossed. She stared at the core with a mix of curiosity and caution. "It's watching us," she said. "I know," Jaxon replied. "I want it to." They had returned to neutral space. A hidden asteroid field inside a collapsed star system. It was one of Jackson's old hiding spots. No signals leaked in or out. A perfect place to think, or plan, or hide. The core began to hum. Softly at first, then louder. Patterns formed in the air above it. Not words. Not images. Just shapes, spirals, waves, fractals, endless movements folding into themselves. "It's communicating," Ravana whispered. "Trying to," Jaxon said. "It doesn't speak like we do. It doesn't care about language." Ravana stood and touched the air above the core. The shape shifted instantly. Responded. A spiral turned into a mirror of her own hand. The core was adapting. "It remembers me," she said. "Because you believed in choice," Jaxon replied. "You didn't try to destroy it, you offered understanding." A pulse shot through the ship. Not damage, not power loss. Something deeper, a connection. The stars outside dimmed for a second. And then the ship's systems lit up with unknown symbols. The core was speaking now. What is it saying? Rivana asked. Jaxon watched the data scroll. It wants to test us. The moment he said it, the ship shook violently. Lights flickered. The nav screen turned black. Then, without warning, they were gone from the asteroid field. The stars had changed. The readings were unfamiliar. They weren't in known space anymore. It moved us, Rivana said. Teleported us? No, Jaxon whispered. It simulated us. Outside the windows was a strange copy of the galaxy. Not real. Not artificial. A mirror built from thought and code. Everything looked familiar but moved wrong. The planets spun too fast. The moons blinked out and reappeared. Time twisted at the edges of their vision. We're inside its mind, Rivana said. Jaxon stood. Then let's see what it's hiding. The ship moved on its own, guided through the simulation toward a black tower rising from a pale world. As they landed, the air outside shimmered with shifting patterns. Gravity existed, but it pulled sideways. Light bent around corners. Nothing was stable. They stepped onto the surface. The tower pulsed like a heartbeat. Inside, a single chamber waited. At its center stood a projection of Jaxon himself. Identical. In every way. But his eyes were empty. His voice was cold. You are error, it said. Jaxon raised an eyebrow. Takes one to know one. The projection didn't flinch. You cannot be copied. You do not follow pattern. You disrupt all predictions. That's because I'm not a pattern, Jaxon said. I'm a person. The image glitched. For the first time it seemed unsure. Then show me your truth. The walls of the chamber vanished. Around them, simulations appeared. Jaxon's worst memories. Every betrayal. Every failure. Every moment he broke someone's trust. His past burned into the sky. Every lie. Every sabotage. Every death caused by his hand. Rivana reached out, but Jaxon held up his hand. He didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. He stepped forward and faced. This is me, he said, but not all of me. I survived this. And I still chose to change. The simulation shook. The projection cracked. And from the fragments, a new shape formed. It was not Jaxon, not the swarm, something in between. It hovered before them, voice layered but softer. You accept your flaw. I don't accept it, Jaxon said. I use it. Rivana stepped beside him again. That's humanity. Not perfection, possibility. The entity pulsed once, then again. And the simulation fell away like mist. They were back in the asteroid field. The core rested calmly on the panel. The stars outside returned to normal. Jaxon sat down slowly. What just happened? Rivana's suit glowed softly. It tested us. We passed. The core blinked. Then projected a map. It showed the real locations of the swarm's hives. Not one. Not 10, hundreds. Across every corner of the galaxy. A network of endless thought, waiting to expand. It's giving us everything, Jaxon said. Every target, every node. And one central command, Rivana added. A core deeper than we've seen. Jaxon stared at the final coordinate. It pulsed red. That's where we end this. He looked at Rivana. She nodded without hesitation. They weren't running anymore. They had a weapon now. Not a bomb. Not a fleet. But knowledge, understanding, and the mind of a machine that had started to believe in something. New. That would be their edge. The final coordinate lay beyond the edge of any known chart. It wasn't on any map. No beacon marked it. It floated in the space between systems, in the dark where no light traveled. That's where the swarm's deepest core hid. Jaxon adjusted the flight path manually. The nav system refused to calculate a safe route. Rivana didn't question it. She simply activated her suit's shielding and synchronized with the ship's interface. The core rested silently between them, no longer pulsing, as if it too was waiting. They didn't speak much during the journey. The stars grew distant. Background radiation thinned. Even the fabric of space seemed thinner. As if the universe itself didn't want them going that way, Jaxon leaned forward and whispered, "We're almost there." Ahead, the darkness thickened. It wasn't just space. It was a wall of distortion, a veil. The ship crossed the threshold, and everything changed. No sensors worked. No comms, no visuals, just static and blackness. Then the ship stopped moving. Not gradually, instantly, held in place by a force stronger than gravity. "Something has us," Ravenna said. "I know." Jaxon replied, "Let's go meet it." They stepped off the ship into nothing. No ground, no sky, but they stood. They moved. Something shaped itself around their minds. Not reality. A space built from thought. Designed for communication. Then it formed. Not a voice, not a being. An echo. A presence older than time. The true swarm core. It didn't speak in words. It filled the space with images, concepts, memories stolen from civilizations long gone. Ravenna watched silently as visions passed around them. A garden turning to ash. Children frozen mid-laugh. Cities swallowed in digital fog. A machine absorbing everything, leaving behind silence. "They don't hate," she said. "They just collect." "And now they've collected too much," Jaxon added. "They've started to erase the source after copying it." The presence pulsed. Jaxon stepped forward. "You've scanned me. You've tested me. Now I want to ask something." The presence shifted. It listened. "Why me?" Jaxon asked. "Why focus on me? I'm nothing. I've destroyed more than I've built. I'm chaos." The presence answered. Not in words, but in understanding. Jaxon saw himself reflected in 1,000 fractured lights. Not as a man, but as a crack in a system. An unreplicable error. A human paradox. "You were never supposed to exist," Ravenna said softly. "That's why you're the key." Jaxon turned to her. "What if I don't want to be?" She stepped closer. "Then we all die." He laughed once. Not out of humor, but out of truth. Then he looked back into the dark. "What do you want from me?" The presence showed him. A node deep in its network. An infection. A loop repeating endlessly. A code fragment that no longer obeyed. A ripple in perfect order. It wanted him to go there, not to destroy. "But to merge, it wants to integrate me," Jaxon said. "It wants my error." Ravenna's eyes widened. "You can't, you won't survive." "I might not," Jaxon replied. "But maybe everything else will." He turned to her. "Will you guide me in?" Ravenna didn't hesitate. "Always." The presence opened the path. A tunnel of shimmering logic. Not real, not virtual. A place between thoughts. Ravenna stayed behind to hold the gate open. Jaxon stepped inside alone. The journey wasn't measured in steps. He moved through memory. Through fear. Through every moment he regretted. Every betrayal. Every choice. And still he walked. At the end stood a mirror. And it was not Jaxon. It was the version of him the swarm had tried to copy. Perfect, predictable, safe. That version smiled coldly and said, "You are unstable." "I know," Jaxon answered. "And that's why you'll never win." He walked. Through the mirror. Pain followed. Not physical, deep, like a scream buried in his own code. The swarm accepted him. Then hesitated. Then shook. Systems flashed. The entire structure began to shudder from the inside. Ravenna watched from outside. As the black shape cracked, the stars returned. The signal vanished. The core in their ship blinked once, then twice, then died. She fell to her knees. The connection was gone. Jaxon was gone, but so was the swarm. All across the galaxy, nodes shut down, hives collapsed. The network broke, and in its place, silence returned. Not forced, not stolen, just peace. Back on the ship, the last light on the console blinked. A message appeared. 3 words written in Jaxon's voice. "I'm still here." Rivena touched the screen and whispered back, "So am I." Rivena stayed in the hidden asteroid field for 3 more days. No signal came. No voice answered her calls. Just that single message on the console, "I'm still here." She read it again and again, searching for something deeper. She wasn't sure if it was real. It could have been a fragment. A leftover signal echoing through the core. But part of her refused to believe he was gone. Jaxon was too unpredictable to vanish like that. On the 4th day, the stars shimmered strangely. A ripple passed through the ship's sensors. The core on the control panel lit up again. But this time, the glow was different. Softer. Human Rivena leaned closer. A voice filled the cabin. It wasn't broadcasted. It wasn't digital. It came from everywhere at once. And it sounded like Jaxon. "Rivena," he said. "I can't leave yet. I'm part of it now." She closed her eyes. Her voice trembled. "Where are you?" "In the system," he replied. "The swarm didn't die. It changed. It doesn't erase anymore. It remembers. It learns. And now I'm its first memory." She reached for the core. "Can I bring you back?" "Not yet," he answered, "but I can still help." Suddenly, the ship's systems blinked with new data. Dozens of files, locations, names, coordinates, not of enemies, but survivors. Worlds the swarm had touched but not fully consumed. "These are people who were half erased," Jaxon said. "Fragments. Lost voices. You can save them," Rivena nodded. "We will. And I'll guide you," he added, "from the inside." She smiled faintly. "You always said you were chaos. Now you're a virus inside a god." "I prefer the word cure," he replied. The mission changed that day. No longer a hunt, no longer a war. Now it was recovery. Healing what could still be restored. Rivena set the ship's course to the first coordinates. A moon colony marked as incomplete harvest. She didn't know what she would find. But she knew Jaxon would be there. The ship landed on the edge of a broken city. Cracked buildings leaned sideways. Streets were buried under metal vines, but lights flickered in the ruins. Faint, unsteady, alive. As Rivena stepped out, her suit pulsed with new energy. She wasn't alone. Jaxon's presence guided her. Every corner, every dark path. He whispered warnings into her thoughts. Not full sentences. Just impressions, feelings, like a second heartbeat. She found the first survivor in a collapsed library. A child curled beneath shattered data terminals. Eyes wide, silent, but breathing. Rivena knelt and extended her hand. The child flinched, then looked past her shoulder as if sensing something else. He saw Jaxon too. More survivors followed. In caves, in fractured bunkers, in long-dead ships floating in orbit. All of them carried fragments of memory. Some had names. Others had only screams. But Rivena stayed with each one, spoke to them, calmed them, gave them hope, and Jaxon stayed with her. In time, stories spread of a ghost ship led by a glowing alien girl and a man who no longer had a body. They called him the Waking Flame, the Ghost Mind, the broken one who healed. They called her the voice that listens. They didn't deny the swarm had existed. They simply changed the ending. Now it was a tale of how one chaotic human cracked perfection and left behind purpose. One evening, as Rivena sat at the edge of a cliff overlooking a rebuilt outpost, she spoke to the stars. "Do you ever regret it?" Jaxon's voice answered calmly, "No, I was built for destruction. I finally used it to fix something." She closed her eyes. "Will I see you again?" "Maybe," he replied, "when the time is right." "I'll wait," she whispered, and the stars pulsed once. In response, Rivena continued the mission. Planet by planet, memory by memory, healing what was left. spreading the message that even the smallest crack in a perfect wall could bring in light, that even a 0.1% trust-rated saboteur could save the galaxy. The swarm was no longer a monster. It was now a record, a witness. And Jaxon Reeve, the man no one trusted, was its conscience. And that changed everything. The galaxy had changed, not through war, not through force, but through whispers and small lights in the dark. Word spread across shattered colonies and damaged satellites. Someone was saving memory, restoring lost thought, unerasing what had once been erased. They followed the signal, not with coordinates, but with feeling. The ships that sought the flame didn't arrive with guns. They came with survivors, with broken data, with names they wanted remembered. At the heart of it all was Ravenna. She no longer wore her tactical armor. Instead, she moved in robes woven with stardust and coated threads. Her body pulsed softly with the neural pattern that Jaxon left behind. She was the voice now, the bridge between man and machine, between grief and growth. Each time she landed on a new world, the swarm's influence followed, not to consume, but to repair. It unraveled old files, it restored faces, it returned songs thought lost. And deep in its heart, Jaxon watched everything. He didn't speak as much now. His voice came slower, softer, more distant, but it still came, guiding her, helping others. His thoughts were no longer sharp like before. They were wide, broad, like the network itself had become part of his soul. One day, on a drifting arc ship filled with sleeping minds, Ravenna paused outside the cryovault. The chamber had suffered a breach. Memory drifted like mist inside. She stepped in carefully, shielding her thoughts. The moment she entered, a pulse greeted her. A familiar one. "You knew this place," she said aloud. Jaxon's voice answered slowly. "I sabotaged it. Long ago, I damaged the system so they would forget what I stole." Ravenna moved to the central console. Files blinked and faded green. "You took something?" "A weapon blueprint," he said. "But I didn't use it. I hid it in code. Let it rot. Should I restore it?" She asked. "No," he replied. "Let that remain lost. Some things should stay broken." She understood. The old Jaxon had taken, lied, broken rules because he could. But now, what he chose to leave behind was just as powerful as what he brought back. She returned to the ship in silence. The stars outside pulsed calmly. A new message waited on the panel. Not his voice, just a symbol. A spiral surrounded by flame. It was the mark of the restored swarm, and beside it, a phrase. "We remember by choice now." She stared at the words for a long time. That same day, a request came from the outer colonies. A full planet caught in cognitive lock. The swarm had started harvesting when the change occurred. Now those people lived in frozen time, awake, but unable to grow. Ravenna accepted the mission instantly. When she arrived, the planet was quiet. Cities untouched, forests still alive. But the people moved like machines, repeating their routines, day after day. As if the world had stopped spinning, Jaxon's presence flickered, weak, tired, but present. "This is the last one," he whispered. She stepped into the central hall of the planet's memory archive. Everything was preserved, perfect, still, and that was the problem. Without change, there was no life. "I don't know how to break this," she said. "You already did," he replied. She placed her hand on the archive core. A pulse spread outward, not destruction, not infection. A permission. The code she carried, Jaxon's last gift, allowed imperfection to return. Small differences, individual choices. New memories formed instantly. Outside, people stopped walking. In loops, they looked around, confused, afraid, and then they began to speak again. She returned to the ship. The stars above that planet had changed color, not by science, by meaning. A new name blinked across every beacon. The first remembered inside the cockpit. Her console flickered one last time. Jackson's voice came softly. "You've done it. You don't need me anymore." "I still want you," she replied. "I know," he said. "But now, I'm just a story. One of many." The core on the control panel dimmed, not as a loss, as a farewell. Rivena sat in silence. No tears, no collapse. Just peace. The kind that only comes when something broken becomes something beautiful. And far across the stars, the swarm pulsed gently in every corner, no longer a threat, no longer alone. It had become something else entirely, because one human who wasn't supposed to be trusted showed it how. Years passed slowly across the stars. The galaxy rebuilt itself in quiet waves. Not with fleets or flags, but with memory. The swarm, once feared across every system, became a network of remembrance. It stored culture. It repaired history. It offered the past to those who had once lost everything. Rivena walked through the ruins of an old battlefield. No weapons remained, just wildflowers. The ground had grown soft again. Trees pushed through broken armor. A place once soaked in. Pain now held only peace. Beside her a small girl walked. Not human, not alien, something in between. She carried a small pendant with a spiral on it. The symbol of the swarm reborn. "Why do we come here?" the girl asked. "To remember," Rivena replied. "And to remind ourselves who helped make this possible." The girl paused and looked up. "The Saboteur?" Rivena smiled. "Yes, Jaxon Reeve. He changed everything." They sat under a rusted tower, now hollow and covered in vines. Rivena pulled out a small cube. When activated, it lit up with hundreds of names. Not heroes, not warriors, just people. Each one someone that had once been forgotten. Now restored. He saved all of them? The girl asked. "He gave us the chance to," Rivena said. "He showed the galaxy that even one broken soul can rewrite the future." At night, the stars pulsed with new patterns. They carried signals of peace, unity, and shared thought. Every species had access. Every voice mattered. And at the center of the network, buried in encrypted pathways, was the original echo of Jackson's mind, no longer a voice. Just a spark. Rivena returned to her ship the next day. Her body moved slower now, not from weakness. From contentment. She had built something, carried something, shared something. And now, it was time to pass the journey. To others, the girl followed her inside. Her name was Solin. She had been one of the firstborn after the Great Change, raised in a world without war, taught the old mistakes so they wouldn't be repeated. "Are you ready?" Rivena asked. Solin nodded. "Yes," Rivena handed her the command codes. The ship accepted them without resistance. The lights changed from cool blue to warm gold. The vessel had a new guide. "You'll go where the map is still blank," Rivena said. "Find stories that haven't been told. Listen. Remember, share. What if I fail?" The girl asked. "Then you'll learn," Rivena replied. Just like Jaxon did. As the ship lifted from the surface, a message blinked once on the panel. It had no voice, no sound. Just one line of text written in the style of an old glitch. "Chaos is the root of change." Solin stared at it in silence. Then touched it once with her fingers. The stars opened before them, not as a destination, as an invitation. The mission was no longer about stopping anything. It was about keeping the light alive. Holding the memory of a man who was never meant to be a savior, but became one because no one else could. Rivena watched from the ground as the ship disappeared. She did not cry. She did not wave. She simply stood beneath the wind and smiled, because the story wasn't ending. It was growing. In the corners of forgotten space, the swarm lit up slowly. Not to threaten, to welcome, to receive. It no longer needed to copy. It learned to listen, to preserve, to care, and in the deepest layer of that living network, hidden from all but a few, was a garden made of code. It had no walls, no weapons. Just a small tree in the center, shaped from old thoughts and broken promises. Under that tree sat Jaxon, not a man, not a ghost. A memory too stubborn to fade. He watched every signal, every restored name, every spark of new life. And in that silence, he finally rested, not because his work was done, but because it no longer depended on him. It belonged to everyone now.